Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Rise of Man Stone Age, and it's from designer Brian Sloan. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, when the Kickstarter project launches, I'll have links up in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section of the video. Those links will take you to the Kickstarter page, find out more information than I could possibly tell you here, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project. Now, what is Rise of Man? This is a competitive card game, a strategic card game for up to 6 players. You and the other players take control of different primitive tribes during the Stone Age, hence the name of the game, and you're just trying to survive. You survive all kinds of different obstacles and even worse hazards, like animals that are hunting your group, and illnesses, and food shortages, or sometimes you just need to learn to live in better ways. And if you can overcome these things, of course, game mechanically speaking, you will earn points. But you also might want to go for different prestige events, like different titles like Chieftain, to elevate your tribe even further. And you're going to do all this with mechanisms like card drafting and just strategic use of the cards that you have. So let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. I want to stress that. So what you see in the final version of the game may be very different than what you see here. Just keep that in mind. But then we're going to come back. I'll give you my final thoughts. Rise of Man Stone Age is a competitive game for up to 6 players. The game lasts for 5 rounds, and the goal is to have the most victory points at the end. Players represent different primitive tribes attempting to gain resources in order to bypass hazards and obstacles and possibly gain special event titles. To set up the game, lay out the special event board in the center of the table. Shuffle up the decks for wild cards, obstacle cards, and hazard cards. The resource card deck requires a bit more work to construct, as you prune out cards that are not appropriate for the number of players that you have, and then add in a certain amount of extra cards, also dependent on the number of players. This ensures a more random and variable setup each time. You'll also have piles of achievement and failure tokens. Guess which one is which? Each player gets a flip chart where you can keep track of your resources: food, predator, health, environment, and tribal. You'll also take a set of 8 special event stones in your color. As stated, there are 5 rounds in the game, and every round consists of 6 turns for the players. At the beginning of each round, each player is dealt either an obstacle card or a hazard card, their choice, except in round 3, when you must take 2 of these cards in any combination, again, of your choice. Obstacles are hardships that your tribe must overcome, linked to the different resources you acquire and keep track of. By the end of the round, you must have a total amount of resources of the appropriate type as indicated by the obstacle. This is cumulative, so as the game goes on, you add up all of the requirements of every obstacle and hazard in your play area. If you succeed, you will put an achievement token on the card, and it will be worth 2 points at the end of the game. If you fail, you put a failure token on it, and you lose 2 points instead. Hazards are just more difficult obstacles. They're worth 3 points instead of 2 because they are riskier, of course. After drawing these, every player is dealt out 10 resource cards. Then, players go into turn order, and every player takes a total of 6 turns. On your turn, you may do only one of the following actions. You can use a resource card to increase the resources on your flip chart. You must meet the requirements as indicated on the bottom of the card. Resource cards stay in your play area forever to be used to meet requirements for the duration of the game. You may instead draw a wild card. Wild cards have random effects and bits of story, but the end result is that you usually gain some resources. Or you may place one of your player tokens on one of the special event squares on the board. To do this, you must meet the requirements, which require different keywords amongst your resources, specific resource cards, and specific completed categories of obstacles and hazards. These special events will give you more points at the end of the game. Regardless of what you choose to do with your turn, players will take their turn simultaneously, revealing their cards, taking their actions, and then passing whatever resource cards they have left in hand to their left, except in round 3, where they pass right. After 6 turns, the round is over, and you will mark obstacles and hazards you succeeded or failed at. Unused cards are discarded, and in the new round, new cards will be dealt out. After 5 rounds of this, the game is over and players add up their points from obstacles, hazards, and special events. Whoever has the most points is the winner. Well, there's a lot of interesting things going on in Rise of Man Stone Age. And what's most interesting is that you have the central mechanism is actually card drafting of a sort, where you're playing a card right away and then passing those cards along. But in the middle of that whole phase, there's a lot going on, because you can play a card, and I always like it when cards can be used for multiple things. In this case, it's not necessarily that a card itself can be used for multiple things, but on that turn where you should be drafting a card, you can instead choose to do other things. So you can take that card, use it, get resources, and you flip it through your flip book, which is a very neat little mechanism that they have. But instead, you could just say, you know what? This card, none of the cards that I have right now are going to work for me. I would rather take my chances to get a resource I desperately need to get through this obstacle or this hazard, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a wild card and hope that that works out for me, even though it is very wild, and you don't really know what's going to happen at that point. Now, as you progress through the game and you've got more and more obstacles and hazards and resource cards under your belt, that is to say on the table, then you can actually go for one of these special events out on the main board, which can get you a lot of points, but it is, of course, very difficult to work up to that. You have to be building up towards those things. So that's where a lot of the strategy of the game comes in, because you'll be planning for that for the whole game. And depending on the number of players, and you have a limited amount of tokens, and there's a limited amount of people who can actually occupy each of the different spaces out on the main board. So it's something you definitely have to keep in mind the entire time. But it is interesting that you have to build up these resource cards. So in other words, it's not just enough that you have to have enough at a certain point just to get through the obstacle or hazard for now. You have to maintain those levels and get better as time goes on, which is, of course, thematic, because your tribe is getting stronger. Hopefully, you're building it up. You're getting more people in the tribe, and you have to learn to survive more and more hardships as your territory expands and you have to fight against other primitive tribes. Things like that. So there's a very, very wide variety of cards. There's a lot of variability in the game because of how you set up the resource deck, which has a ton of cards, not only depending on the number of players, but every number of players has more randomized extra cards thrown in, so you're never quite sure what you're going to end up with on a particular game. Some of the special events out on the board may not be that viable in a certain game, while others are very viable from switching from game to game. So there's a lot of variability. It's actually not a very complicated game, despite any of the stuff that I just said, so you can just jump right into it. Very easy to learn, very fast to play. And I think that because of that, because it's accessible while at the same time having a lot of strategic elements to it, as well as a strong theme, people are going to be very interested in this game for all of those reasons and possibly more. And if you're interested, but you want to know even more about the game, please go to the official Kickstarter project page. When the project launches, there will be a link up in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section of the video. Those links will take you to the page, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. That is Rise of Man Stone Age, self-published by designer Brian Sloan. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.